Admiral Korath Vex stood on the bridge of his crystal ship, watching the stars bend around him like servants. His tall, blue-skinned form glowed with inner light, and his golden eyes could see across vast distances. For 3,000 years, his people had ruled this part of space. Every species they met called them gods, and why wouldn't they? The Zephyrians could move objects with their minds, live for centuries, and make their ships appear from nowhere like magic. "My lord," said his second-in-command, bowing low, "the outer worlds send their monthly tribute. The Krellans offer their finest metals. The Vortaki present their young for your blessing." Korath nodded. This was how things should be. 47. Different alien species across hundreds of worlds all worshipped his people. They built temples, offered prayers, and gave up their best resources. In return, the Zephyrians protected them from pirates and other threats. It was a good system that had worked for thousands of years, but today brought strange news. "There are reports from the Rim worlds," his officer continued, his voice nervous. "A new species has been found. They call themselves humans. Another primitive race," Korath said without interest. "Send usual fleet. They will kneel like all the others." "My lord, these humans are different. They have advanced ships. When our scouts demanded worship, they they laughed." Korath's glowing eyes flashed. "Laughed? Yes, my lord. They seemed confused by our divine presence. One of their leaders said something about getting in line behind something called the IRS. This was troubling. In all of Korath's long life, no species had ever been confused by Zephyrian divinity. Most fell to their knees the moment they saw a crystal ship appear. The psychic pressure alone usually made primitive minds collapse in worship not far across space. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard the USS Defiant. His ship was small compared to the massive carriers back home, but it was tough. And fast. Morrison was 42 years old, with graying hair and tired eyes. He had spent the last 5 years exploring unknown space, mapping new systems for Earth's colonial expansion. "Captain," called his navigation officer, Lieutenant Amy Foster, "we're picking up some unusual energy readings from the next system." "Over." "Unusual how?" Amy frowned at her screens. "The signatures don't match any known technology. The energy patterns are almost organic, like they're alive." Morrison leaned forward. "Any signs of ships?" "3 contacts, moving in formation. They're big, sir. Each one is about the size of a battlecruiser." "Red alert," Morrison ordered. "All hands to battle stations." Amy tried to get a visual. The main screen flickered, then showed 3 ships unlike anything in human records. They looked like they were made of crystal and light, with smooth curves that hurt to look at directly. They moved without any visible engines, gliding through space like swimming fish. "They're hailing us," reported the communications officer. "Put them through." The screen changed to show a tall, glowing figure. Admiral Korath Vex appeared in all his divine glory, his form radiating power and authority. His voice echoed with harmonics that should have driven lesser beings to their knees. "Mortals," Korath proclaimed, "you are in the presence of divine beings. I am Admiral Korath Vex of the Zephyrian Empire. Bow before our glory and prepare to offer tribute." Morrison blinked. "Tribute? Your finest resources, your most valuable goods, and the acknowledgement of our godhood. All species serve the Zephyrians. We are the light that guides the darkness, the power that shapes reality itself." Morrison scratched his head. "Look, buddy, I don't know what kind of scam you're running, but we're just here to map star systems. We're not looking for trouble." Korath's eyes blazed brighter. "Scam? You dare speak to a god with such disrespect?" "God?" Morrison almost smiled. "Right. Well, you'll have to get in line behind the IRS, the DMV, and my ex-wife if you want worship from me. Amy Foster watched her sensor. Readings with growing interest. The alien ships were putting out massive energy signatures, but the patterns were familiar once you looked past the fancy light show. Captain, she said quietly, their shield harmonics are similar to our deflector array technology. Different. Power source, but the basic principles are the same. Morrison nodded slightly. These aliens had advanced technology, but they weren't actually gods. They just wanted everyone to think they were. Your insolence will not be tolerated, Korath declared. We will demonstrate our divine power. Your minds will break before our psychic might. Morrison felt a strange pressure in his head, like someone was trying to push thoughts into his brain. It was uncomfortable, but not unbearable. He had felt worse headaches after drinking too much coffee. Is that it? Morrison asked. Because I've got a splitting headache from my morning briefing, that's worse than whatever you're doing. Korath was shocked. The psychic attack that could paralyze entire fleets had barely affected this human. Impossible. No mortal mind can resist divine influence. Look, we really don't want any trouble, Morrison said. How about we all just go our separate ways and pretend this didn't happen? There will be no mercy for blasphemers, Korath snarled. You will learn to fear the gods. The crystal ships began to glow brighter, energy building in their strange weapons. Morrison sighed and turned to his tactical officer. Well, we tried being polite. Amy, what do you think? Can we take them? Amy studied her readings. Their ships are big and pretty, but their weapon systems don't look that different from Centauri plasma cannons. We should be able to handle them. You hear that? Morrison called to the alien admiral. My tactical officer thinks we can handle you. She's usually right about these things. Korath had never encountered anything like this. Where was the fear? Where was the awe? These humans treated him like he was just another alien with fancy technology. It was impossible and insulting. Destroy them, he ordered his fleet. The first. Battle was brief. The Zephyrian ships fired beams of pure energy that could melt asteroids, but the USS Defiant's shields held. Morrison's crew worked with calm efficiency, treating the divine wrath like any other enemy attack. Their weapons are powerful, but slow to recharge, Amy reported. We can get between their firing cycles. The Defiant dove and weaved between. The energy beams, its pulse cannons finding weak spots in the crystal ship's defenses. One Zephyrian vessel took heavy damage and retreated. The other two held formation, but seemed confused by human tactics. This is impossible, Korath muttered. They should be cowering in terror. Instead, the humans were taking detailed sensor readings of his ships and discussing shield frequencies like they were analyzing a technical manual. It was the most insulting thing that had ever happened to him. Morrison opened communications. Again, listen, we don't want to fight, but we will if you keep shooting at us. How about we call this a draw and go home? Korath stared at the human captain. This mortal had just fought gods to a standstill and was offering to call it even. The concept was so alien that Korath couldn't process it. This is not over, he finally said, and ordered his remaining ships to retreat out as the crystal vessels disappeared. Morrison turned to his crew. Well, that was interesting. Amy, make sure we get all those sensor readings to Fleet Command. I have a feeling we're going to be seeing more of these people. The first crack had appeared in the Zephyrian Empire, though they didn't know it yet. For the first time in 3,000 years, someone had looked at their gods and seen only advanced. Aliens with fancy ships, and that someone had not been impressed. High Priestess Lirale paced through the sacred halls of the god temple, her silver robes flowing behind her. The crystal walls around her pulsed with soft light, responding to her agitated thoughts. For 3,000 years, she had helped maintain The divine illusion that kept 47 species worshipping the Zephyrians. Now that perfect system was under threat. "The reports are confirmed," she said to the assembled council of divine arbitrators. "The humans show complete immunity, too. Our psychic influence. Worse, they treat our manifestations of power as mere technology." Elder God Naltos, ancient even by Zephyrian standards, leaned forward on his throne. "How is this possible? No species has ever resisted our divine presence." "I don't know," Lirelai admitted. "But Admiral Korith's encounter has already caused problems. 3 subject species have begun asking questions about our true nature. The Krellans want to know why their gods couldn't defeat a single human ship. The implications were terrifying. The Zephyrian Empire had grown soft over the millennia, dependent on worship and tribute from primitive worlds. If their subjects realized they weren't actually gods, the entire system would collapse. Meanwhile, Captain Morrison's report had reached Admiral Patricia Davis aboard the massive carrier USS Independence. Davis was a veteran of 23 years. In Earth's Navy, with short gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had fought in the Centauri conflicts, battled space pirates, and negotiated with hostile alien species. Nothing in her experience had prepared her to deal with aliens who thought they were gods. "So they actually believe they're divine?" she asked her intelligence officer, Commander Nick Stone. "It seems that way, Admiral. They've maintained this illusion across multiple star systems for thousands of years. 47 different species pay them tribute and worship them as gods." Davis studied the tactical reports. "But they're not actually gods. They're just an advanced alien species using psychological warfare and superior technology." "Exactly. And Captain Morrison proved they can be fought and beaten using conventional tactics." Davis nodded thoughtfully. The situation was more complex than a simple first contact. These Zephyrians had built an empire based on lies and intimidation. If humanity could expose them, it might free dozens of oppressed species. "What's our current strength in the sector?" "The Independence Battle Group, plus 3 destroyer squadrons and 2 cruiser wings. Admiral Parker's fleet is 2 weeks out if we need reinforcement." "Good. Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we've encountered a species that has enslaved multiple worlds through false claims of divinity. Request permission to intervene." The Zephyrians weren't waiting for human permission. Admiral Korith had convinced the God Council that swift action was needed. They would launch a divine punishment campaign against human colonies, demonstrating their power so overwhelming that even these strange immune humans would have to submit. The first target was New Phoenix, a mining colony in the Outer Rim. The settlement had 8,000 colonists and minimal defenses. It should have been an easy victory that would restore Zephyrian prestige. Commander Lisa Park was having her morning coffee when the attack began. She was the colony's security chief, a former Marine who had retired to the outer worlds for a quiet life. That quiet life ended when 3 massive crystal ships appeared in orbit and began broadcasting demands for surrender. "People of this world," boomed the voice of war god Nexus Prime, "you have harbored blasphemers who dare defy divine will. Submit now and accept judgment, or face total annihilation." Lisa put down her coffee and activated the emergency protocols. "All civilians to the shelters. Defense Force, man your positions. And someone get me a sensor reading on those ships." The colony's chief engineer, Ben Carter, was already at work in the command center. Ben was the kind of man who could fix anything, with spare parts and determination. He looked at the incoming energy signatures with professional interest. "Those are some fancy plasma conduits," he muttered, adjusting his scanner settings. "Power source is weird, but the delivery system is just advanced particle projection." "Can we fight them?" Lisa asked. "Maybe. Their weapons are powerful, but they seem to have long recharge cycles. If we can survive the first barrage, we might have a chance. The Zephyrians had expected immediate surrender. Instead, they found a human colony that treated their divine proclamations like a standard raid warning. The colonists went to prepared shelters. The defense force took positions behind energy barriers, and someone was actually scanning their ships for technical specifications. War God Nexus Prime was offended. These mortals dare analyze divine power? Show them the futility of resistance. The crystal ships opened fire with beams of concentrated energy that could level mountains. The human shields flickered but held. The colonists didn't panic or pray for mercy. They just waited for the weapons to recharge and then fired back with everything they had. Ben Carter had rigged the mining lasers to work as weapons, linking them to the colony's main power grid. When the Zephyrian shields proved resistant to conventional fire, he began experimenting with different frequencies and harmonics. Try rotating the pulse pattern, he called to his team. Their shield matrix has a resonance gap at 700 terahertz. Lisa coordinated the defense from the command bunker, treating the attacking gods like any other hostile force. She called for ammunition resupply, organized evacuation routes, and requested backup from the nearest patrol fleet. At no point did she consider surrendering to divine authority. The battle lasted 6 hours. The Zephyrians threw everything they had at the small colony, expecting the humans to break under divine wrath. Instead, they found opponents who adapted their tactics in real time, shared technical data during combat, and treated impossible odds as a logistical challenge. Status report, Lisa demanded, as another energy barrage shook the command center. Shields. At 60%, reported her tactical officer. Ben's modifications are working. Their weapons are losing effectiveness. Casualties? Surprisingly light. The colonists are following evacuation procedures perfectly, and our defensive positions are holding. Good. How long until the patrol fleet arrives? Admiral Davis is 2 hours out with the Independence Battle Group. Lisa nodded and opened communications to the Zephyrian fleet. This is Commander Lisa Park of New Phoenix Colony. You've been shooting at us for 6 hours and haven't accomplished much. Our reinforcements will be here soon. Last chance to surrender peacefully. War God Nexus Prime stared at the communication screen in shock. A mortal was offering him the chance to surrender. The concept was so foreign that his mind couldn't process. It's impossible, he whispered. We are gods. This cannot be happening. When Admiral Davis arrived with the Independence Battle Group, she found the Zephyrian attack fleet in disarray. The gods who had expected easy victory were instead facing organized human resistance that refused to acknowledge their divinity. Admiral, called her communications officer, Lieutenant Grace Murphy, we're getting some weird transmissions from the alien fleet. They keep talking about divine authority and mortal insolence. Put me through to their commander, Davis ordered. War God. Nexus Prime appeared on screen in his full divine aspect, energy wreathing his form, and his voice echoing with harmonic power. I am Nexus Prime, God of War and Divine Justice. Your species has committed blasphemy against the Eternal Order. Prepare for judgment. Davis listened patiently, then turned to her aide, Colonel Tim Brooks. Schedule a formal surrender ceremony and prepare documentation for war crimes tribunals. These people have been enslaving multiple species for thousands of years. Yes, Admiral. Should I contact the JAGI office about proper procedures for prosecuting self-proclaimed deities? Good thinking. We'll need to document everything properly. Nexus. Prime listened to this exchange with growing horror. These humans were discussing his divine authority like it was a legal matter. They were planning to put gods on trial for war crimes. You cannot judge the divine, he protested. We are beyond mortal law. Everyone's beyond the law until they get caught, Davis replied. You've been running a protection racket across multiple star systems. That's going to require some paperwork. The second major engagement of the war lasted 3 days and ended with complete human victory. The Zephyrians retreated in confusion, their divine authority shattered by opponents who treated their gods like particularly annoying aliens with fancy technology. In the aftermath, Admiral Davis sent her preliminary report to Earth Command. Under Enemy Capabilities Assessment, she noted that the Zephyrians possessed advanced technology and impressive psychological warfare capabilities, but showed poor adaptability when their primary tactics proved ineffective. Her recommendation was simple. Standard first contact protocols appear sufficient for future encounters with self-proclaimed deities. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled through fear and awe for 3,000 years. Now they faced an enemy that was completely immune to both. For the first time in their long history, the gods were afraid. The USS Independence hung in space like a metal fortress, surrounded by the scattered wreckage of 3 different battles. Admiral Patricia Davis stood on the bridge, studying the tactical displays that showed Zephyrian fleet movements across the sector. In just 2 weeks, everything had changed. The gods were running scared, and their subject species were starting to ask uncomfortable questions. "Admiral," reported Commander Nick Stone, "we've got intelligence reports from 16 different worlds. The Zephyrians are pulling back their temple ships and consolidating their fleets. It looks like they're preparing for something big." Davis nodded. She had expected this. When you spent 3,000 years convincing everyone you were divine, having mortals kicked your teeth in was bound to cause problems. What about their subject species? Mixed reactions. Some are still loyal, but others are starting to rebel. The Krullans have stopped sending tribute. The Vortaki are asking questions about Zephyrian technology. 3 species have requested formal contact with us. Good. How long before their main fleet arrives? Our scouts report a massive force gathering near their homeworld. At least 60. Capital ships, maybe more. They'll be here within the week. Davis turned to her science officer, Dr. Helen Price. Helen was a thin woman with sharp eyes who had spent her career studying alien technology. She had been analyzing captured Zephyrian equipment for days. "What have you learned about their capabilities?" Helen pulled up her reports. "They're advanced, but not impossibly so. Their energy manipulation is based on crystalline matrices that focus psychic energy into physical effects. Their shields use harmonic resonance to deflect attacks. Their weapons are powerful, but have obvious limitations, such as long recharge times, limited targeting systems, and they're designed more for intimidation than actual warfare. These people haven't fought a real war in centuries. They're used to enemies that surrender the moment they show up." Davis smiled grimly. "Then they're in for a surprise." The Zephyrian war fleet was indeed massive. War god Nexus Prime had assembled. Every divine vessel in the Empire, from the smallest temple ships to the great cathedral-class dreadnoughts that could level planets. At the center of the formation flew the personal flagship of God Emperor Azrael himself, a crystal mountain that blazed with the light of captured stars. Admiral Korath Vex stood beside his emperor, watching the human fleet on the long-range sensors. The USS Independence and her battle group looked tiny compared to the assembled might of the gods. "They have 23 ships," Korath reported. "We have 68. They cannot possibly stand against us." Azrael was ancient even by Zephyrian standards, his form wreathed in energy that bent light around him. He had not left his homeworld in over a century, but these upstart humans had forced his hand. Their resistance ends today. We will demonstrate such power that even their strange minds will break. "My lord," said High Priestess Lirelei, "perhaps we should attempt negotiation first. If we can make them understand our divine nature." "No." Azrael's voice shook the bridge. "They have seen our power and remained defiant. They have corrupted our subjects with their blasphemy. They must be destroyed completely. The final battle began near the gas giant Kronos, where the Independence Battle Group had taken position. Among the asteroid fields, Admiral Davis had chosen the location carefully, using the gravitational effects and debris fields to limit the Zephyrians' numerical advantage. When the God fleet arrived, it was a sight that should have struck terror into any mortal heart. 68 ships of crystal and light, each one blazing with divine power, arranged in a formation that blocked out the stars themselves. At their head came Azrael's flagship, reality bending around it as it moved through space. "Holy cow," muttered Lieutenant Grace Murphy at the communications station. "That's a lot of ships." "Language, Lieutenant," Davis said mildly. "We're about to fight gods. Let's keep it professional." Communications Officer Ryan Scott looked up from his console. "Admiral, they're hailing us. The energy signature is off the charts. Put them through." A main screen filled with the image of God Emperor Azrael in all his terrible glory. His form was barely visible through the energies that surrounded him, and his voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Mortals," he proclaimed, "you have defied the natural order of the universe. You have raised your hands against gods and turned our children against us. For this blasphemy you will be unmade. Your very atoms will be scattered across the void." Davis listened politely, then turned to her aide. "Colonel Brooks, is there a form for this? Threats of atomic scattering probably require some kind of incident report." Colonel Tim Brooks checked his tablet. "I'll have to look it up, Admiral. This is pretty specific language." Azrael stared at them in disbelief. "You dare mock divine judgment with bureaucracy." "Not mocking," Davis replied. "Just following proper procedures. If you're going to threaten to scatter our atoms, we need to file the appropriate paperwork. There are safety regulations about that sort of thing." Chief Tactical Officer Ryan Scott was studying his sensor readings with professional interest. "Admiral, their flagship is putting out massive energy signatures, but the patterns are similar to what we've seen before. Bigger scale, same basic principles. Can we handle it?" "Should be doable. Their weapons are still slow to recharge, and they seem to prioritize spectacular effects over tactical efficiency." Davis nodded and opened fleet communications. "All ships, this is Admiral Davis. We are engaged with a hostile force of 68 vessels. They call themselves gods, but our analysis suggests they're just aliens with fancy technology. Treat them accordingly. Engage at will." The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. The Zephyrians unleashed the full fury of divine wrath, filling space with energy beams that could crack moons and gravitational distortions that warped reality itself. They expected the humans to break and run in the face of such overwhelming power. Instead, they found opponents who treated divine manifestations as targeting solutions. When war god Nexus Prime split his flagship into multiple aspects to confuse human sensors, Ryan Scott simply updated his targeting computer and requested permission to engage multiple hostiles. "Splitting into 3 ships just gives us more targets," he reported calmly, adjusting fire control accordingly. Captain Morrison, now commanding a destroyer squadron, used the asteroid field to redirect Zephyrian energy attacks back at their own fleet. When the gods hurled lightning that could shatter worlds, the humans used gravitational lensing to turn it into a weapon against its creators. "Nice light show," Morrison commented as a massive energy beam missed his ship by meters. "Amy, Ken, we use their own power against them?" Lieutenant Amy Foster, now his tactical officer, was already working on it. "Yes, sir. Their weapons are so powerful they're causing gravitational distortions. We can use those to redirect their fire." Dr. Helen Price watched the battle from the Independence's science station, taking detailed readings of every Zephyrian. Weapon system. When God Emperor Azrael unleashed his most devastating attack, a beam of pure destruction that could unmake matter itself, she calmly adjusted her sensors and began analyzing the energy patterns. "Interesting," she muttered. "It's not actually destroying matter, just converting it to energy. The process is reversible if you know the right frequencies." Admiral Davis overheard her. "Can we defend against it?" "Already working on it. I'll have a countermeasure in 10 minutes. The Zephyrians had never encountered enemies like this. Their most terrible weapons were met with scientific curiosity. Their divine fury was analyzed and catalogued. When they unleashed powers that had cowed civilizations, the humans asked if they could get better sensor readings. Admiral Korath watched his empire's greatest fleet being systematically dismantled by 23 human ships. It was impossible, but it was happening. The humans showed no fear, no awe, no recognition of Zephyrian divinity. They fought gods with the same calm efficiency they would use against space pirates. "My lord," he said, "to Azrael, perhaps we should withdraw, regroup, and try a different approach." "No," Azrael raged. "I will not retreat before mortals. Observe my ultimate power." The God Emperor began to glow brighter than a star, energy pouring from his flagship in waves that made space itself scream. He was preparing to unleash the God Killer, a weapon that could destroy entire solar systems. It was forbidden, dangerous, and had never been used in battle. Admiral Davis watched the energy build up with interest. "That's new. Helen, what do you make of it?" Dr. Price studied her readings. "Big, but unstable. He's drawing power from his ship's core systems. If we can disrupt the energy flow, the whole thing might collapse. Can we do that? Give me 2 minutes." As Azrael prepared to destroy the human fleet with divine power beyond mortal comprehension, Dr. Helen Price calmly calculated the precise frequency needed to destabilize his weapon. When she found it, she turned to Admiral Davis. "Ready when?" "You are, Admiral." Davis smiled. After 3,000 years of terrorizing the galaxy, the gods were about to learn what happened when they met humans who weren't impressed by their light show. "Fire," she ordered. The countermeasure beam struck Azrael's flagship just as he unleashed the God Killer. The unstable energies collapsed back on themselves, overloading the crystal ship's systems, and the crystal halls of the God Temple were darker than they had been in 3,000 years. High Priestess Lirelei walked through the sacred chambers where once the light of divine authority had blazed eternal. Now the walls flickered with uncertain energy, responding to the fear and confusion that filled every Zephyrian mind. The impossible had happened. The gods had been defeated by mortals. "The fleet is returning," reported Elder God Malthus, his ancient form trembling with shock. 43 ships lost or damaged. God Emperor Azrael's flagship is barely functional. The humans destroyed the God Killer weapon and treated our ultimate manifestation of power like a technical malfunction. Lirelei stared at the tactical displays showing the retreat. For 3 millennia, Zephyrian fleets had swept across the galaxy, demanding worship and receiving it. Now they limped home, broken by 23 human ships that had fought them, with the casual efficiency of exterminators dealing with pests. "How many of our subject species have received reports of the battle?" "All of them," Malthus said quietly. "The humans broadcast the entire engagement on open channels. Every world that has worshipped us for centuries watched their gods retreat in defeat. The rebellion had already begun. The Krellans had seized their tribute ships and declared independence. The Vortaki were dismantling their temples and asking for technical assistance from Earth. 12 other species had formally requested protection from human forces. The Empire was collapsing as word spread that the gods could bleed. Admiral Patricia Davis received the surrender request 3 days after the Battle of Kronos. She was in her quarters, reviewing casualty reports and damage assessments, when Colonel Tim Brooks knocked on her door. "Admiral, we've got an incoming transmission from the Zephyrian homeworld. It's from their Emperor." Davis set down her coffee and straightened her uniform. "Put it through to the conference room. And Tim, make sure. We're recording everything. This is going to be historic." God Emperor Azrael appeared on the main screen, but he was a shadow of his former divine glory. His energy wreath had dimmed to barely visible flickers, and his voice no longer echoed with harmonic power. He looked like what he had always been. Beneath the illusion, an old alien who had lived too long on the worship of others. "Admiral Davis of the human fleet," he began, each word clearly difficult for him to speak. "We... The Zephyrian Empire requests formal negotiations for the cessation of hostilities." Davis studied him with professional interest. "Are you surrendering?" The word hung in the air like a curse. In 3,000 years, no Zephyrian had ever spoken it. The concept was so alien to their nature that Azrael's form flickered as he struggled to say it. "We... acknowledge that the current conflict cannot be resolved through divine intervention." "So you're surrendering," Davis repeated patiently. "We are... requesting... diplomatic resolution." Colonel Brooks leaned over to Davis. "Should I prepare the standard surrender documentation?" "Yes, but we'll need to modify it. Add a section about claims of divinity and include provisions for war crimes tribunals. These people have been enslaving entire species for millennia." Azrael watched this exchange with growing horror. The humans were discussing his surrender like it was a routine administrative task. They were planning to put gods on trial as common criminals. "You cannot judge divine beings," he protested weakly. "We are beyond mortal law." "Lieutenant Commander." Kate Johnson, Davis's legal officer, looked up from her tablet. "Sir, we'll need to determine your actual legal status first. Are you claiming diplomatic immunity based on divinity? Because we don't recognize that as a valid legal doctrine. You'll need to file the proper forms." "Forms?" "Yes, sir. Department of Existential Threats has specific procedures for this kind of thing. I can send you the paperwork." Admiral Korath Vex watched his Emperor's humiliation from the bridge of his damaged flagship. The proud Zephyrian leader, who had once commanded the worship of billions, was being given bureaucratic forms to fill out by human clerks. "My lord," he said quietly, "perhaps we should consider their terms." Azrael's form flickered with the last remnants of his divine fury. "Never. I am the God Emperor of the Zephyrian Empire. I will not submit to mortal judgment." But even as he spoke, reports were coming in from across the Empire. The Kandorian Collective had declared independence and was requesting human protection. The Thraxian Republic was dismantling their god temples and converting them to schools. The Milleran species was asking Earth for technical assistance in building their own space fleet. The psychological foundation of Zephyrian power was crumbling. For 3,000 years, they had ruled through fear and awe. Once their subjects realized they were just another alien species with advanced technology, the illusion could never be rebuilt. Helen Price was in her laboratory aboard the Independence, studying captured Zephyrian technology with scientific fascination. The crystalline matrices that had once seemed like divine artifacts were revealing their secrets under proper analysis. "It's actually quite elegant," she told Admiral Davis during their daily briefing. "They use psychic energy to manipulate matter. At the quantum level, the crystals act as amplifiers and focusing devices. Very advanced, but not magical. Can we replicate it? Eventually. The principles are sound, but it would take years to develop the manufacturing techniques. Their technology is based on organic crystalline growth that we don't fully understand yet." Davis nodded. The strategic implications were significant. If humanity could master Zephyrian technology, It would revolutionize space travel and planetary defense. But that was a concern for the future. Right now, she had to deal with the immediate problem of what to do with a fallen empire. The formal surrender ceremony took place aboard the Independence 1 week later. God Emperor Azrael arrived in a small shuttle, his divine flagship too damaged, to make the journey. He was accompanied by Admiral Koreth and High Priestess Lirelai, both looking like they were attending their own execution. The ceremony was held in the ship's main conference room, with representatives from Earth Command. Attending via holographic link, Admiral Davis had prepared extensively for this moment, consulting with diplomatic experts and legal scholars about the proper procedures for accepting surrender from self-proclaimed deities. "This is Admiral Patricia Davis of the United Earth Fleet," she began formally. "We are here to accept the surrender of the Zephyrian Empire and to establish terms for the cessation of hostilities." Azrael stood before the conference table, his once mighty form reduced to little more than a tall, tired alien. The energy that had once made him seem godlike was gone, leaving behind someone who looked very old and very defeated. "I am Azrael, ORMER, ruler of the Zephyrian Empire," he said slowly. "I formally surrender all military forces under my command and acknowledge the authority of the human fleet in this matter." Davis nodded and activated her recording device. "For the record, you are surrendering unconditionally?" "Yes. And you renounce all claims of divinity?" Azrael's form flickered one last time. Yes. We are not gods. We never were." The words seemed to physically pain him. 3,000 years of carefully maintained illusion died in that moment. High Priestess Lirelai made a sound like a sob, while Admiral Koreth stared at the floor in shame. "Very well," Davis said. "The terms of surrender are as follows. All Zephyrian military forces will stand down immediately. All tribute collection from subject species will cease. All claims of divine authority are to be publicly renounced. War crimes tribunals will be established for those responsible for the enslavement and exploitation of 47 species." "War crimes?" Koreth looked up in alarm. Lieutenant Commander Kate Johnson consulted her notes. "You've been running what amounts to a protection racket across multiple star systems for 3 millennia. That's going to require extensive legal proceedings." "But we protected them," Lirelai protested. "We maintained order, prevented wars between species, provided technological advancement through intimidation and false claims of divinity," Davis interrupted. "You enslaved entire civilizations by convincing them you are gods. That's not protection, that's exploitation." The formal proceedings continued for 2 hours, with human lawyers carefully documenting every aspect of Zephyrian surrender. Aliens who had once demanded worship from billions were now signing legal documents and agreeing to submit to mortal courts. When it was over, Azrael sat in the shuttle and would take him back to his homeworld, staring out at the human fleet. Admiral Koreth sat beside him, equally silent. "How did we lose to them?" Azrael asked quietly. "They have inferior technology, smaller numbers, shorter lifespans. How did mortals defeat gods?" Koreth had been thinking about that question for days. "They were never afraid of us. From the first moment Captain Morrison met our forces, they treated us like just another alien species. They analyzed our weapons, studied our tactics, and adapted accordingly. But our psychic powers had no effect on them. They seemed naturally resistant to mental influence. Or perhaps," Koreth paused, considering, "perhaps they're just too stubborn to be impressed by anyone." Azrael laughed bitterly, defeated by stubbornness. "And bureaucracy," Koreth added. "They have forms for everything, including surrender procedures. For self-proclaimed deities, they approach the impossible with administrative efficiency." Back on T. 6 months after the surrender, Captain Jake Morrison found himself in the strangest assignment of his career. The USS Defiant was orbiting the former Zephyrian homeworld, and Morrison was sitting across a conference table from beings who used to claim they were gods. His job was to help establish normal diplomatic relations with a species that was still learning how to exist without worshipping subjects. The Krellans are requesting increased trade quotas for their metal exports, Morrison reported to Admiral Korith Vex, who now served as the Zephyrian liaison to human forces. They want to expand their mining operations and need technical assistance. Korith nodded, making notes on a human-designed tablet. The former Divine Admiral had adapted surprisingly well to his new role as a bureaucrat. What about the Vortaki Education Initiative? Going well. They've established 12 new universities and are requesting human teachers for their engineering programs. Apparently, they want to learn how to build ships that can fight gods. Korith winced slightly. They still call us that sometimes. It will take time for old habits to change. Morrison studied the alien who had once commanded fleets in the name of divine authority. Korith looked healthier than he had during the war, less burdened by the weight of maintaining an impossible illusion. Do you miss it? Being worshipped, I mean. You would think I would, Korith said thoughtfully. But the truth is, being a god was exhausting. We spent so much energy maintaining the illusion that we forgot what it was like to simply exist. Now, I can have conversations with other species without them prostrating themselves every few minutes. It's surprisingly pleasant. On the bridge of the USS Independence, Admiral Patricia Davis was reviewing the quarterly reports from across the former Zephyrian Empire. The transformation had been remarkable. Worlds that had stagnated under divine rule were now experiencing rapid technological and social development. Admiral, called her communications officer, Lieutenant Grace Murphy, we're getting a priority message from the Thraxian Republic. They've successfully tested their first faster-than-light drive. Davis smiled. The Thraxians had been one of the most oppressed species under Zephyrian rule, forbidden from developing advanced technology. Now they were building their own starships and exploring systems that had been off-limits for centuries. Send our congratulations and offer technical assistance if they need it. Dr. Helen Price approached with her latest research report. Admiral, I've completed the analysis of the Zephyrian crystal technology. The applications for medical science alone could revolutionize healthcare across human space. Any progress on understanding their psychic abilities? That's the interesting part. It turns out their psychic powers weren't that unusual. Many species have similar abilities to some degree. The Zephyrians just learned to amplify them through technology and psychological conditioning. What made them effective was the belief of their subjects, not any inherent divine nature. Davis found that fitting. The Zephyrian Empire had been built on faith rather than force, and once that faith was broken, the entire system collapsed overnight, got in the former god temple on the Zephyrian homeworld. High Priestess Lyra Lai was working with human archaeologists to document 3,000 years of imperial history. The crystal halls that had once blazed with divine light now hummed with the quiet efficiency of a research facility. This section details the early expansion period, she explained to Dr. Sarah Kim, the lead historian from Earth. When we first encountered primitive species, we genuinely believed our advanced abilities made us superior beings. The worship began almost accidentally. When did you realize you weren't actually gods? Lyra paused in her work. I think we always knew deep down. But after a few centuries of being worshipped, it became easier to believe our own propaganda. We told ourselves that our superior technology and longer lifespans gave us the right to rule. Eventually, we forgot the difference between having power and deserving it. Dr. Kim made notes on her tablet. What changed when you met humanity? You didn't care about our claims of divinity. You looked at our technology and saw engineering problems to solve. You looked at our empire and saw a protection racket that needed to be shut down. You treated us like equals who had gotten too big for their britches. And that bothered you? Lirelai laughed, a sound that would have been impossible during the days of divine authority. It terrified us, but it also freed us. We had been trapped in our own mythology for so long that we had forgotten how to be anything else. Former God Emperor Azrael spent his days in what had once been his throne room, now converted into an office where he worked with human legal experts to establish war crimes tribunals. The trials were conducted with careful attention to justice, rather than vengeance, focusing on the systematic oppression of subject species rather than personal punishment. The Kandorian testimony is particularly damning, noted Judge Rebecca Stone, the chief prosecutor sent from Earth. Forced labor, resource extraction, and prohibition of technological development. These are clear violations of interspecies law. Azrael nodded sadly. We told ourselves we were protecting them from the dangers of advanced technology. In reality, we were keeping them dependent on our supposed divine intervention. Why are you cooperating with these proceedings? You could have refused to participate. Because Admiral Davis was right. We committed crimes against entire civilizations. The fact that we called it divine will doesn't change what we did. If we're going to move forward as a normal species in a larger galaxy, we need to acknowledge our mistakes. The trials would continue for months, but they were conducted with a spirit of justice rather than revenge. Many Zephyrians received suspended sentences in exchange for cooperation in dismantling the imperial system and providing technical assistance to their former subjects. Morrison's strangest assignment came when he was asked to escort delegation of former Zephyrian gods to a diplomatic conference with their former subjects. The meeting was held on a neutral space station with representatives from all 47 liberated species. This is surreal, Morrison muttered to his tactical officer, Lieutenant Amy Foster, as they watched Admiral Korith shake hands with a Kraylan diplomat who used to worship him as a divine being. It's working, though, Amy replied. Look at the trade agreements they're negotiating. The Zephyrians have 3,000 years of accumulated knowledge to share, and their former subjects have resources and perspectives they've never had access to before. The conference was a success. Species that had been forbidden from contact with each other for millennia were establishing diplomatic relations, trade partnerships, and scientific exchanges. The galaxy was becoming more connected and collaborative than it had ever been under divine rule. Admiral Davis attended the closing ceremony, watching as former gods and their former subjects signed mutual defense pacts and cultural exchange agreements. It was a remarkable transformation from an empire based on fear to a coalition based on cooperation. Admiral, said Colonel Tim Brooks, we've received word from Earth Command. They're requesting a detailed report on how to handle future encounters. With self-proclaimed deities, Davis smiled. Tell them the procedure is simple. Treat divine claims like any other unsubstantiated assertion. Request documentation, ask for performance metrics, and don't be impressed by fancy light shows. Gods tend to be less godlike when you ask them to fill out forms. The final scene of the Great Transformation took place 1 year after the surrender. Captain Morrison was back aboard the USS Defiant, exploring new systems beyond the former Zephyrian Empire. His crew had encountered 3 new species in the past month, all of whom had responded to first contact with curiosity rather than worship. It's different out here, Morrison told Admiral Davis during their weekly communication. The species we're meeting now have never been conditioned to expect gods from space. They're much more interested in trade relations and cultural exchange than divine authority. Any problems? Just the usual first contact challenges. Language barriers, cultural misunderstandings, and one species that wanted to know if we could help them with their tax system. Apparently, they have similar problems with revenue collection that we do. Davis laughed. Some things were universal, even across species lines. The Zephyrian Empire was history, replaced by a loose confederation of independent worlds that traded freely and governed themselves. The former gods had become respected members of the galactic community, valued for their knowledge and experience rather than feared for their power. And at the center of it all, humanity continued to explore, to trade, and to treat the impossible, with the same calm professionalism they brought to everything else. When the next species claimed divine authority, they would find themselves facing opponents who measured miracles against standard operating procedures and asked for proper documentation. Of supernatural claims, the age of gods was over. The age of equal partnership among the stars had begun. Morrison filed his final report on the Zephyrian incident with a recommendation that became standard procedure for all future exploration missions. When encountering claims of divinity, maintain professional skepticism, document all phenomena, and remember that anyone can claim to be a god until they meet someone who isn't impressed. In the end, that was home.